to the Faith Therapy Podcast, and I'm your host, Marilyn Shaw. I'm having intimate conversations with therapists, faith leaders, and wellness influencers with one goal in mind: to bridge the gap between faith and mental wellness. As a best-selling author and soon-to-be therapist, I'm passionate about providing practical tools to renew your mind, restore your faith, and redefine your life. The information shared in today's episode is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed counselor. If you need one, visit myfaiththerapy.com. That's myfaitherapy.com. All right, guys, so today we're going to be talking about all things female friendships and having meaningful connections. And today I'm inviting to the guest chair Danielle Bayard Jackson. She is a female friendship coach. Yes, it is a real thing. And Danielle has a wealth of knowledge around how to navigate connections, what to do when friendships get a little crazy. And we also dived into this new idea around people pleasing. Well, really, people pleasing isn't a new idea, but what to do if that kind of falls in your lap a little bit more than it should be. And I also got a chance to talk with her about if you're a high achieving woman and you're doing all the things, but your friendship area may be lacking. So what to do about that? But the conversation was amazing. We really was able to, I felt like there was a moment for me where I receive some extra support around how I can be a better friend as well. So if you are someone that needs some help with making meaningful connections and being seen and heard and how to really overcome people pleasing if that shows up in your life more than it should, then you're in for a treat. Danielle, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing amazing. Thank you so much for taking out time to be on the podcast and to just provide your expertise around all things female friendship, connection, and all the things. So let's kick off the conversation with my favorite question to ask all guests. When did faith and mental health come together for you?
That's a great question. I think for me, in two ways, along the entrepreneurship journey, because there's so many ups and downs. You have so many voices in your ear of what's right, what you should be doing. And also in marriage, which I'm learning so much. So in those two spaces, I think there's been a beautiful blend of faith and therapy. And so for me in both of those paths, it's been really helpful to make time for stillness to hear what God has to say about what I should be doing and who I am, but also getting, tangible support from mental health professionals who have helped as well.
What's been the most challenging part for you navigating the intersection of those two worlds? I mean, you're talking about entrepreneurship, all things money, finance, and that's already touchy as is. And then when you think about your connection to your husband and just you as an individual, you're showing up in both of those spaces. And clearly there's always this tug and balance and evolution. But for you, what's been the hardest part for you?
If I'm being honest, I think staying focused on what matters, if I'm being honest. I think we all like to say, I have my values, I hold, tightly to my values, and I would like to think I do too, but it's so easy to get caught up in what certain business podcasts and your friends and social media are saying you should be pursuing next. You don't want to miss this opportunity, and you have to compromise in this way a little bit. I mean, if you want to get traction, there's so much noise. I think people giving advice and gurus. I think what has been helpful, but also a challenge, is staying focused to, at the end of the day, what matters, who am I, whose am I, and what is my purpose. But you have to revisit that question every day. It's not just like a one-time thing.
You do. I mean, especially when you're in the space of, especially for your career, right? You're here as this subject matter expert, all things around female friendship and them navigating the nuances and just the connection in itself. So, but then you also have your own personal experiences where you're evolving as a person. And I definitely don't want to miss the opportunity for you to share how did you end up in this industry as, I want to say, one of the only and the one that does it the best around female friendships?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that endorsement. It was not something I had planned for myself. I was actually a high school English teacher for 6 years, working with 12th graders. So my students are 17, 18, and between classes and after school, they're mostly bringing me their friendship related issues. So I had a front row seat to how issues of connection and belonging would affect your performance, your confidence, your mood. So I got to see it and trace it back to like, oh gosh, if they're having issues with one another or feeling isolated, they're not raising their hand as much in class. They don't feel confident about this. Their grades go down. I mean, so I saw it. And then I left that space and I got into the world of public relations. And it's so interesting, working with high achieving people and realizing that they too have issues in their relationships. It's private. You're not necessarily leading with that because you have an image to maintain. But you realize like, oh gosh, you're also trying to figure it out. And that's when it hit me of, wow, at every stage of womanhood specifically, we're trying to figure out, how do I navigate relationships with other women? Who do I want to be? What do I do when I feel rejected? How do I find friends who fit where I am in life? And it's an ongoing thing. You never have it figured out. And so that's when I said, okay, let me use my background in education to study what the research has to say about women's cooperation, communication, and conflict. And so far, it has been a really fun ride.
That's awesome. Very cool. I mean, you're like the friend that the woman needs to hear in the back of their head, like, no, do it this way. No, do it that way. And those of you that may not know, Danielle's podcast is all about just that intersection of the research that you can find around female friendships, but the conflict as well. And you're always giving, that research perspective, things that you're seeing with clients that you're working through. So I want to dive in a little bit. What are some of the common issues that people experience when it comes to connection?
Okay. So the number one question I get, hands down, is always, how do I make friends? And it often comes with some kind of qualifier. So people want to know, well, how do I make friends as a child-free woman when all my other friends have kids? How do I make friends as a woman of faith? How do I make friends in a new city, as a new mom, as a military wife? So people want to know, how do I find people who reflect back to me the way I see the world, who can be affirming to me? How do I find them? So that always seems to be like the number one question. Other conflicts around connection include having hard conversations with friends is really tough, especially as a woman. You don't want to be perceived as difficult. You don't want to look like you're bringing drama. You don't want to look like you always got a problem. So there's so much around. There's something that doesn't feel right, but I am too scared to say it. I fear she will withdraw or abandon me, that she'll talk about me to our mutual friend, all of that. But then, the anxiety and depression that might come from sitting on something that doesn't feel good for sake of not rocking the boat. So hard conversations is another one. And then I think a final one would be women who feel like they are invested more than their friends are. I reach out, I'm making suggestions, I make the plans, and she doesn't pursue me. She doesn't ask about, follow-up questions to that thing I told her last week. So feeling alone in their expression of desire and connection. So those would be like the top connection-based issues that I see most often.
You know what? When you started talking about the last part where women feel like I'm giving more than I'm receiving, and the last podcast episode, I was talking with a faith leader, Marquita Collins, where she talked about her journey with people pleasing in the faith space. She's a leader, she's serving, which is very common for people to hear in the faith arena, but she felt a lot of betrayal, and her own personal connection to it was around the people pleasing aspect and her journey to disconnect from that mindset and belief system. So for you, when you're thinking about I mean, you're working with women, that's a challenge that they're constantly seeing, this lack of connection that's the same. And but how do they stay connected but not move into this space of people pleasing where they're like overextending too much and trying to accommodate the other person, whereas not being reflective around what their own personal needs are, desires?
Yeah, that's a great question because I think a lot of us, I mean, I had a people pleasing, some tendencies a while ago, but I have been delivered from that. And now I'm very much on the other end. But, it's so hard, especially as a woman, because we are
Oh,
sensitive
yeah.
to certain cultural pressures to, be polite, accommodating, be agreeable, especially Black women. I don't look, want to look like I'm being a problem. So, girl, I'm cool, I'm down, whatever,
Yeah.
when in reality I'm not. And I think one thing that can help in terms of how do I stay genuinely connected when I have people pleasing tendencies is to remember that I want you to experience platonic intimacy. You probably want that for yourself. We want to feel known, seen, safe, supported. That all sounds really nice. You will not experience that if your goal is to make sure she is always pleased. Because in order to achieve that, that means I need to be quiet about my preferences, my needs, things that make me uncomfortable. I have to be quiet about all those things because my priority is making sure you are pleased. Well, if that's the case, then I will never be truly known. You don't know anything about what makes me comfortable, what makes me light up, because it feels like a risk to me to share those things with you because you might be displeased with me. So I'm not going to share honestly of my preferences, goals, needs, and desires because I don't want to risk you being displeased. But the risk you are also taking is to never be truly known. So how are you, I mean, not to be dramatic, but how are you ever truly loved by another woman if she never really knows you? But you won't show your full self because you're so intent on pleasing her. So it all kind of goes together. So I get worried about people pleasers because I often wonder about how seen they feel in their friendships, and not to victim blame, but how much are we contributing to those conditions?
That's good, Danielle. It sounds like you're helping women to find their voice, because if their natural default is to stay silent, not rock the boat, not be confrontational in a sense, or be able to raise their hand and say, this is what I need, or to verbalize their expectations or things that are just clearly not being met, or as simple as sharing a win with a woman. You may feel like, I don't want to be too or share too braggadocious, whatever the thoughts that people ruminate around that. But the idea that there is this silence it's a very dangerous place to be. How are you helping women to actually verbalize the things that they need among their female friendships?
Yeah, so I'm really big on making it clear. I'm not a therapist. I'm a coach, and so I try to make sure
A
women
very good
understand that
coach at
distinction
that.
before. Yeah, since we, because I know therapists and coaches, we have beef. People are like, stay in your lane, girl. I think it's important for women to understand the ways that I can help, my limitations, and what you're going to get here. So for us, we really focus on goals. What is it that you want? You start me there like a North Star. And then we're going to figure out together, let's collaborate, co-create some strategies to help you achieve that goal. Now, for me personally, as an educator, I love studying the research. So it just comes to mind during conversation. I'll say, oh my gosh, that actually reminds me of this. Why don't you try this? Because the research says that that's effective. And women tend to like that approach. But what's the goal? And for most of us, we would say, man, I want to feel free in my friendships. Most of us, it comes down to that. I want to feel free to love freely without calculating whether or not she's going to use it against me if I share. I want to feel free to speak my heart without wondering if she's going to weaponize this. I want to feel free to challenge her and push back without looking difficult. I mean, you want to feel free in friendship without calculating, protecting yourself, measuring your words. It's exhausting. And so for most of us, the goals, we might use different words and details. Essentially, that's what we're all looking for. And so it's about figuring out, okay, if that's what you want, what might that require of you to change? Sometimes it's just changing how you show up in a friendship. Sometimes it's
Yeah.
exiting the friendship. I think some of us can engage in that prematurely. But, it's about what do you want? And a lot of us can speak that very clearly. The next task becomes, all right, now what are we going to do to make that happen?
As a coach, you are that voice for people to really think through the things that keep them stuck at times. They have an idea of what freedom looks and feels like for them. And it's almost like their introduction to uncovering limiting belief systems that they have about themselves and how it shows up in community with other people. And it's actually, I believe, especially someone that starts with someone like yourself, it gives them an avenue to problem solve, get to a particular goal, but then they may uncover some deeper issues that where it may lead to an actual relationship with the therapist where they can really see, okay, this behavior of people pleasing is showing up in my friendship, but did that start as a child? Did I see my mom, kind of hold back or not have genuine connections or have a silent voice at times? So I think the value that you're adding is so needed for people. And it's like that introduction for them to overcome the things that are right there in front. But then also the other thing I like about it is when you think about when you're going through the most difficult time in your life, right? How important it is to have that connection with someone and being able to be your vulnerable self, to really, take off the mask and show up authentically without reservation around, will the person hear me, see me, be there for me, or just a listening ear? I want you to share for a moment, what comes to mind for you when you think about connection and friendship when a woman has experienced some form of life tragedy, transition, hard time in their life?
The first thing that comes to mind when I kind of think of friendship at the intersection of grief or loss or tragedy is a lot of our tendency to isolate, and then how detrimental that can be. And I think we all know that intellectually, like, okay, I know I don't need to be alone. But when you're grieving, especially as a woman, but we don't want to bring our friends down. We don't want to be a burden. We fear people won't get it. So is it even worth trying to explain what I'm going through? Because she won't even get it. And all those things further and further isolate us. So it's kind of ironic, our withdrawal from community because we feel like we're doing it for noble reasons. I don't want to be a downer to them. I don't want to take up space. I don't want to look needy. I don't want them to have to inconvenience themselves to come and bring me dinner and sit with me and listen to. I don't want to be a burden to community. So we pull away from community thinking we're doing the noble thing or being strong. But, you heal through community. And again, we know that, but giving them a chance to show up for you. I know for me recently, well, not recently, but about a year ago, a friend, we're talking and hanging out in the back patio, and she shared something with me that I had no idea she had been going through health-wise. None. This is one of my best friends. I had no idea. But she is just, the strong type. And she just was like, kind of said it kind of matter of fact, like, it's not a big deal. I've been handling it. And I remember feeling angry. I remember feeling angry that we're friends and you would not invite me in emotionally to offer support. That's why I'm here. So I was actually offended that she would not allow me to, activate my friendship powers to come and help and sit alongside her and just be with her. So, the right friends, they are hungry for opportunities to show up for you in your grief. But I know that it's very vulnerable to allow yourself to be supported.
How did that friendship, where are you guys now? How did that, when you were able to share with her the feelings that you had of like, wait a minute, I'm here for you, but for some reason everybody processes things differently, right? But the disconnection, what came up for you?
Yeah, so, we're great now. I think she was surprised to hear that my response was like, why did you not tell me? And then, and I had to reflect on that later because I'm like, that's probably not the proper response. Like, she's finally opening up. And the first thing I feel is like offended instead of like, receptive. So, that was on me. But for me, it looked like instead of hoping that she would change, because I told her like, please tell me that I want to be there for you, but in addition to that, I had to think, she might not change. If she values feelings of self-sufficiency, there's nothing I can say to change that if that's something about who she is and how she operates. So I had to think about, well, what can I do? So whenever I spend time with her, I try to make the time longer because I've noticed she opens up once we settle in. When we do the quick lunch coffee catch up, it's just self-reporting the details of what happened since the last time we talked. When we have the 3 hour kiki on the back patio, stuff comes up because we've
Yeah.
settled in. So for me, I've said, okay, with her, the hangouts have to be longer to get to it. And then also prompting more about what's going on as opposed to saying, well, if something's going on, she'll tell me. So
Yeah.
now being a little more intentional about like, well, what's going on with that thing you mentioned 2 weeks ago? Like, what did the doctor say? And prompting for information as opposed to thinking, well, it's not my job to keep up with her life. She'll tell me. That wasn't working out for me too well, obviously. So I guess it gave me a lot to reflect on in terms of how to better show up so that doesn't happen again. And so far, so good.
Yeah, something beautiful happens when there's that extra time. And when you were telling the story, I immediately thought about when I had a girls' trip. We went to Miami and we were together probably about a good 2.5 days. So much fun. I mean, we went to a concert. It was amazing. It was like 8 or 9 of us that were there. And I'll never forget, it was the morning before we were going to the concert. And we were just hanging out in the Airbnb, drinking coffee, catching up, talking. And we were literally sitting there for about 3 or 4 hours. And it became like a deep connection for all of us. Like, I was vulnerable totally unexpectedly, others were vulnerable as well, but it's like this imprint in my heart where I remember that moment, and it now becomes almost like this point of reference of when we do come back together again, because we have these different check-ins about every quarter where we'll kind of do like a get together at the house or something. It takes me back to that moment to where I'm more intentional about listening and remembering that moment of connection for people, because it is hard to open up when you are going through something challenging in your life, because you may value that self-sufficiency. You hear it all the time, check on your strong friends. So I want you to kind of share for a moment, as someone that may be that strong friend, or you're the voice or the ear that has to take in more than you share. How do you coach a woman to be more open about sharing their vulnerabilities and not waiting until things aren't in the best situation?
Yeah, so this sounds so like very basic, very pedestrian, but starting with a list of the costs and benefits of what you've been doing. So you just handling it on your own, I got it. What have been the benefits? Oh, I don't burden my friends. Great. What has that been costing you? That choice. Feelings of isolation, perpetually dissatisfied with the way that they do show up. A lot of them fall into like, I got to be there for everybody else, blah, blah. Okay, have you ever let them know when you do need support? No. Okay, so what have the cost been? It might even be complaining to my spouse about my friends not showing up and how I got to do everything myself. Okay, like being a downer to other people about the lack of support, but not even notifying people that there's a need for support. So looking at the costs and benefits of what you have been doing, how has that been
Right.
working for you? And then the second is, the things that make you proud about yourself, especially for high achieving women. Why do you feel so proud about, I can do this myself? I got it. Like, again, I'm not equipped to process where that started and how that happened. But, if that's a constant barrier, is you feeling like I got it myself, that makes me feel proud of myself. Just looking at like how you even, your identity and what you value about yourself, what you see as strengths, and maybe unlearning some of those things and just looking at the tangible impact it's been having. So I don't know how that developed. I'm not, skilled or trained to unpack that, but I can help you point and look at the tangibles of like, okay, so relationally, what has the impact been of keeping things to yourself? Are you growing resentful? Are you, so we talk about, that, about like a mindset shift. And then we get into the tangibles in terms of, just practicing with little things. So if I am going to share something that feels vulnerable to me, we talk about giving some kind of signal to even let people know, because sometimes we hint at it and then we
Yeah.
get disappointed in their response. But you were like, delivered it in a way that was kind of vague in the first place. So, if you share something about your marriage or work or whatever, saying to them, I actually, haven't shared this before, but, or, I haven't told anybody this yet, but, or I can't believe I'm even going to say this out loud, but like, you got to give me some kind of sensitivity signal as a friend,
Yeah.
because what's vulnerable for you might not be for me. I might be the friend who talks about her marriage all the time. So you telling me something about, your sex life and your marriage feels like nothing to me because I feel comfortable. But for you, that
Yeah.
was kind of a lot. So you're going to have to signal to me like, oh, this is a big deal for her. Right. So what are some ways that we can kind of like, hedge our announcement or our sharing to let them know, this is a big thing for me, but I'm gonna try it,
Right.
or we even talk about making it plain from the beginning, like showing your cards, telling them what you're about to do. So even saying, I guess I'm trying to work on, opening up or whatever. So, let me tell you about what happened last week, to even, make it transparent what you're doing.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm trying to work on being vulnerable. So let me say it, that way you don't feel like you're pretending or trying on a new personality. You're letting them see what you're trying to do.
Right.
Because most friends, they'll honor that, and now they know how to respond appropriately. Like, oh, this is okay. She needs support. This is a moment. But people really want that from you, and if you want deeper friendships, I mean, that's what it requires.
Girl, you're giving the cheat code here. You're like giving people what to say, how to say it, so that they feel, accountable with their friends. And I mean, if I start a conversation with like, well, I can't believe I'm about to say, and you can clearly see people are not like leaning into what you're about to say, those are kind of indicators of like maybe your squad or circle isn't the best. One thing that we're getting ready to focus on within the faith therapy community is radical transformation. And there are two areas that can help someone get to that position. The first thing is not being afraid to confront limiting belief systems that keep them stuck. And the second thing is checking your squad. Who's in your ear? Who has your attention? What are you looking at? What does the community look like? Because for once, if you're talking about doing something radical or transformational in your life, 9 times out of 10, the folks that are around you, they're going to reflect the old version of you in some way, shape, or form. So if you're talking about going to a new level, there may be this opportunity of where you may have to cut some folks out or limit the time that you spend with them or how much you share with them because your focus is completely different. So let's talk about conflict for a minute or pausing on a friendship. How should a woman, if they're realizing like, you know what, this has been my girl for a long time, but where I'm headed, I'm focused on radical transformation. I think I may need to just say pause the relationship a little bit more while I'm in this season. What should they do?
Okay, so that is so tough. And let me say this. I'm actually gonna share something that is fresh for me. Okay,
Okay.
fresh, right? And I personally am working on being more vulnerable and not just being like, a talking head, whatever. And maybe it's just something about you, Marilyn, where I'm like, you know what? Let me open up because you just feel like it just is like such a safe space when people talk to you.
I love it.
But I asking for a break feels really awkward with anybody for anything. A break from
Right.
work, a break from your boyfriend, like it's really awkward, okay? But at least it feels normal in other spaces. You need a timeout from work, a sabbatical, a mental health day, normal. I need a break from our relationship. I got to figure things out, normal. So it's awkward to ask for, but we know a script for how to handle that. We kind of have an idea of how that's going to go. A break
Yeah,
from a friendship feels very foreign. Like, what are
it
you
does.
talking about? You're either in it or you're not. I think there's
Right.
also so much language around, especially women's friendship, where it's like, we just believe we should have like an organic connection because we're women. Like it just should be easy, natural. So if you have to ask for a break, well, then this must not be the real deal. Like then we must not be, because we kind of secretly subscribe to the idea that it should be just like easy and natural if it's a friend. Otherwise, why are
Yeah.
you friends? So all of that makes it feel very jarring if you were to say like, can I take a time out? Recently, I had this conversation with a friend. It was so difficult, awkward. You're trying to get the right words. I had to pray before we got on the phone. I'm like, Lord, help me to choose the right words. Help her
Yeah.
to receive it. in the spirit I'm giving it. I'm not vilifying her, but I think I need a timeout. And the best thing you can do is when you are speaking to be very direct. And by direct, I mean, we're not saying hedging words like, I just feel like, I don't know, maybe I'm crazy, but I just feel like all of that. And normally we're talking about like the feelings and stuff. In terms of the technical delivery, you need to sound sure. You need to not be apologizing for the thing that you're saying you need. Maybe I'm sorry, I definitely don't want to, the last thing I want is to confuse you. The last thing I want to do is hurt you. I think they'll appreciate things like that. But if you have made up your mind, you've prayed about it and this is what you need, do not apologize as you are delivering it. You don't want to be diluting your own message, but you can still deliver it warmly. So I like, starting hard conversations by saying, hey, I've been thinking about this for a while, so they know I'm thoughtful. I'm not being impulsive. I'm not being reactive. I've been thinking about this for a while, and I wanted to share something with you. The last thing I want is awkwardness. The last thing I want is for you to be upset with me. You call out the thing that you are scared of happening. The last thing I want is for there to be drama with our friends. But I've been, I think that I need XYZ right now, whatever that thing is. Be careful about focusing on what you're moving toward instead of highlighting her inadequacies for the break, because that can get really messy. So instead of me saying, you're not this enough, and I don't like that you did so that's why I need a break. It might be true. I've just seen that go sideways, because now she's going to defend every example you give. What are you talking about? Okay. Now, if you feel a need to do your thing, but you can get distracted. Instead, I'm just going to highlight where I'm trying to go. Hey, I've been, reflecting on my friendships. I've been reflecting on, just some connections I've had and where I want to go, spiritually or whatever. And I just, the last thing I want to do is confuse you or have you be upset with me. But I think I need a timeout. I think I need a timeout from the texting and the hanging out for a second, so I can just kind of hear clearly. And I understand if that would be upsetting. I understand if it feels like I'm putting you on a weight, and I'm not trying to do that. But I'm really trying hard to be honest. And I feel like I'd be a bad friend if I was being dishonest with you. So that way it's like, sure, she might be angry and disappointed, but at least you were honest. At least she has all the data that she needs to determine what she would like to do. She can wait. She can say, well, who do you think you are, putting me on a break? Like what? But at least she has all the data that she needs to decide what she would like to do. And you can live free of the anxiety, the dread, the contradictions of trying to maintain something that doesn't feel good to you. Which again, is going to be very awkward when you're having that conversation, but you also feel really relieved. And if you feel like you've been called to release that friendship, you'll be operating in obedience. So that's got to bring you some level of peace,
Yes. Man, Danielle is like great when it comes to talking about connections, and I want to pause this episode to just insert what is next for Faith Therapy. And the Lord really laid on my heart about, we're in a season of radical transformation. You're not alone. I'm actually walking through this myself, and the two areas that need to be evaluated in all of our lives is, one, not being afraid to confront limiting belief systems that keep you stagnant. And the second thing is evaluating your squad. And I'm so grateful that Danielle just was able to dive in and share what we need to do. But I want to take it a step further and invite you to join the Radical Transformation Challenge. It's going to be kicking off in January. Go to myfaiththerapy.com/radical, and it's where you will find information about going to the next level. If you realize that in your life there are just some limiting beliefs, you're stagnant and stuck, you're kind of just on the hamster wheel and you're not progressing in a way that you would like to, quite frankly, you feel like freedom is a far distance, it's almost imaginative and it's a dream but not a reality for you, I want to encourage you to take the Radical Transformation Challenge. We're going to have a kickoff event on December 8th at AR Workshop in Tampa, and I want to invite you to join us there. Then we're going to be prepared for the new year to transition our minds from a stuck place to actually being transformed. So go to myfaiththerapy.com/radical so that we all can evolve and be transformed together. Let's get back to the episode. Absolutely. And you said the key word about obedience, because when you go back to the process of when I shared the two things of what radical transformation really looks like, and you realize that possibly, or a strong feeling being direct, you know that this particular connection isn't serving where you need to be, and that a pause is necessary, and you know that the Lord is giving you that instruction and saying, hey, where you're headed, I need for you to release so that I can give what you need for where you're going. It may be a new friendship or a new connection or a moment of solitude so you can hear clearly from Him around the direction of where you're going. But the key is that level of obedience. Now we hear that word, but you did an excellent job, Danielle, sharing what does that look like practically. How do I confront things that keep me stagnant, things that may not necessarily serve me well? And the truth of the matter is, it may not be them. They may be a great friend, but for some reason, maybe that connection isn't sitting well in your life. Maybe you are that people pleaser and you are overcompensating with that relationship instead of prioritizing where you're headed. I love that example that you gave. And those of you that are listening, that's a clear, practical way to be ahead of the game, really being intentional about the space of obedience, because that's what radical transformation is really built on. Getting to that place of being obedient about your purpose and where you're headed, and then being bold enough to do an evaluation around the folks that are in your life. So now that that person is on pause, right? They're on pause, and you're headed in this new direction of purpose and whatever that looks like for you. And now you are coming in contact with new folks. How do people, I'm trying to think back now, like, when's the last time I made a new friend? Like, we're friends. It's not like a business relationship, because I network all the time, right? But when you're talking about friendship, where it's nothing related to like business connections or who you know or things of that nature, we're just talking about you're my girl, I'm your girl, and we're doing life together, right? How do people go about that? It's a new process.
Yeah. Well, first, I'm really glad that you said that. Like, man, I have people all around me. You're a social
Yeah.
butterfly, you're an extrovert, and you're a conversationalist. Especially because of your business, it has you out there in the world shaking hands. I'm glad you led with that, because it's often extroverted high achievers that I work with. And I'm noticing that for so many of us, our job is such a part of our identity that we often
Yeah.
lead with it in almost every space we're in where it's social. We're talking about our coaching, our business, which is great. But a lot of
Yeah.
us show up as that part, and it kind of sets the trajectory for the kind of relationship it's going to be. Because I'm talking to you about my business, and then I see overlap, and I'm like, oh my God, we could work together. Or, oh, you could be a client, or let me refer you. It's got so much business context that it does become cloudy later of like, wait,
Yeah.
are we friends, or just like really cool business acquaintances? So the first thing I'd suggest is, if you're a woman in that space, you're a goal getter, is to figure out what else do you have going on that is not related to your accomplishments or your profession, that you can sometimes lead with in social spaces. What would it look like if you weren't saying your name followed by what you do, or talking about your business? Just what would it look like?
Yeah.
Because I think even taking the hat off starts to open you up to connect in a different way, where it's not performative, where we're not boss
Yeah.
mode Danielle. It's just like Danielle the person, just a woman out here in the world. So the first
Yeah.
tip for high achievers is that, who would you be, or how would you even introduce yourself if you cannot talk about what you do? So that would be the first one in terms of positioning yourself for friendships that are not at all business related.
Yeah.
I think the second thing is to figure out. I like to lead people through this exercise, and I think this will help answer the question. So we go through I am statements. The statement, I am blank, right? How would you fill in the blank with varying aspects of your identity? So if you were to complete the statement, I am blank, let's say like 5 times, what might that look like? So for me, it might be, I am a woman, I am black, I am a mom, I am a creative. These are all my things, right? So
Yeah.
the next question becomes, what spaces am I in where I feel affirmed in each one of those aspects of my identity? I need to be in spaces that are like woman dominated where I feel like, oh, these women get it. I need to
Yeah.
be in black organizations, black friendships, something where I feel seen, they get it. I
Yeah.
feel seen and understood. I need parenting friends and communities and spaces that I'm in where I'm like, these people can support me in a very specific way. But the first thing is like, if you want to feel more seen and satisfied from the beginning, what are the parts of you currently that feel detached or disconnected? You might not be pouring into various aspects of your identity. If you're a creative, what communities are you in where you feel energized and most creative? Oh, you're not in any of them because you're so obsessed with work or whatever it is. That's the first thing to start offering direction of where to go, to start to
Yeah.
find your people, you know. And then the last thing I would suggest is, get comfortable leveraging technology. And I know we say like it's a young people thing or whatever, but it's becoming increasingly more popular to use apps like Bumble for Friends, where like, yeah,
Yeah.
people are out here swiping to find women who they're like, yo, I'm looking for somebody who wants to explore the town. I'm new to the city and I want to find women who are like me, who want to go out and hang out or go to the theater or go to a museum, but I don't know where to look. Well, if you have
Mm-hmm.
awkward work hours, if you have like a demanding schedule or whatever it is, this can help a little bit with connecting
Yeah.
with people you would not meet just walking down the street in your normal routine. So people are out here doing it, and it's working for them. So I think just being intentional about leveraging technology, about figuring out what are the various aspects of my identity, and how am I positioning myself in spaces where I can be in community around that intersection of my identity. And then I think just telling yourself, I'm a connector. So I think for a lot
Yeah.
of us, we think connection is something we do. Like I'll send a text or I'll say hello to a stranger. Like if they say hello first, they go first. Being a connector, like connection has to be something you do. So all those
Mm-hmm.
behaviors are just an extension of who you are. That way I'm not having a reactive or passive role in my own friendship story. If there's a woman in my life and I'm like, man, she seems cool. Like whenever we get together, we laugh. She's cool. Great. That's a great candidate to start being a little more intentional with. To be like, hey, the last
Right.
time we were talking, you mentioned that you're, into this podcast. Have you seen this one? I thought you'd like it. Like I'm showing you, I'm trying to demonstrate what it might be like to have me as a friend, as opposed to like saving that stuff for women who become friends. I'm gonna do that friend type stuff with you up front so you can preview the experience of being friends, but like, is there a chance of rejection? Sure. But there's also a chance that you find your people that way.
That's so good, Danielle. I mean, that's your homework, guys. And thank you for that free coaching session, by the way, sharing with me of what I need to do as a high achiever around, friendships. Of course, I have my, group chat, but I'm thinking like we've been connected for a while and, we get together every now and then. But when I think about my, you know, everyday life and just meeting somebody outside of work and connection and business and all of that, it's, you know, I need to, step up in that area a little bit more and think about, what are those I am statements for me to build relationship. I also was thinking about like my husband. He is like friendly to everyone. Like he's the one that's saying hello to people outside. Like I am like, okay, I'm going to the next. Where, that kind of thing where he's a little more open and willing and to just, make that deeper connections with people. So thank you for sharing all of that today in today's episode. The other thing is, I know that you have friend forward podcasts for people to listen to. Tell us about your podcast and your community with female friendships.
Yeah, so all the information lives at betterfemalefriendships.com, but we do produce an episode every week of a show called Friend Forward, and it's just 15-minute episodes that we try to pack with, research and insights on some aspect of women's friendships. So it might be, this week we did how to support a friend through divorce, and I talked to experts who can offer very specific, research-based insights on that, or how to find like-minded people, how to have a hard conversation. A recent episode was like 7 things that your single friends want you to know. So the benefit of focusing on one specific topic, women's friendship, allows us to have very specific conversations about that world.
Yeah.
And it's been really fun to have women trust me with their questions, and to show up every week and give suggestions for the next show has been really fun. So I feel really grateful for women who are plugged into the community and sharing about it, and anybody who's trusted me to be a part in some small way of their personal friendship journey.
That's awesome. And tell us about your book that's coming out.
Yeah, so my book titled Fighting for Our Friendships comes out May 7th, which feels like forever, but it's happening.
Oh, it's
like
right
it feels like it's
corner.
coming up very quickly. But
Yeah.
essentially, I wrote the book to try to answer the question, why is it that women's friendships are deeper than men's, but more fragile? Why do we have like these deep, intimate friendships, yet we have a slew of former friendships that we could, list on a sheet of paper? What's going on?
Yeah.
It feels contradictory. So sharing the research around depth, connection, and conflict in women's friendships, along with some practical tips on how to navigate, common day-to-day conflicts.
Ooh, that sounds like a good book club situation right there.
Yes.
To kind of pull together. I love that. That is I never even thought about that. We are so deep, but baby, it's very fragile. Very fragile. I'm pretty sure people have a list of blocked, do not disturb, don't talk to ever again. So that was good. I like that. Very exciting. Very exciting. Danielle, thank you so much for being on the podcast. I really appreciate your insight and wisdom. And every guest, I ask them to do something that may sound a little awkward, but hey, we're a faith platform, is to pray us out.
Oh, to ask me to pray us out?
Oh, yeah, girl. It's on you.
Okay. Wow. Okay. All right. Let's do it. Okay.
Let's do it.
Lord, first, I just thank you for this conversation. I thank you for edifying conversations, encouraging conversations, Lord. And I thank you for being present, Lord, in this fellowship. God, right now, it's most on my heart to pray for any woman who's listening who feels discouraged about what is possible for her on her friendship journey. I pray for women who feel alone, who feel isolated, who feel misunderstood, and who have a heart that has grown hardened because they are so hungry for community but have been hurt so many times. My prayer is that you soften their heart, that you give them optimism, and that you, Lord, lead the way as they work to build fruitful, healthy connections. We thank you in advance for all that you will do in our friendships with other women, and we thank you for being the model of what it means to be in a healthy relationship. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
That was a first, Marilyn.